Rain tapped against the tall windows of the Windsor estate like 1,000 whispered secrets. The world outside shimmered beneath the gray morning haze, but inside, everything was still, too still. On the four-poster bed lay Alexander Windsor, the formidable billionaire whose name commanded respect in boardrooms and fear in his household. At 60, he was a man of legacy, discipline, and untold wealth, but today he looked fragile, pale, weak. The doctor, a trusted confidant, closed his briefcase after one last glance at Alexander's vitals. "Your family believes you're seriously ill," he said softly. "They're all gathered downstairs, sir." Alexander's eyes flickered open, sharp, calculating, far from the dull gaze of a dying man. "Good," he whispered. "Let's see who comes for love and who comes for the will." For months, Alexander had suspected something dark brewing within his own family. Disappearing funds from the foundation, secret meetings, and the strange coldness that had grown in his mansion like mold after rain. He had built everything from scratch, the empire, the fortune, the name. But now, he wondered if all of it had corrupted those closest to him. Downstairs, the Windsor family had gathered like actors on a stage. His eldest son, Damien, a ruthless businessman who agreed behind charm, paced near the fireplace. Beside him, Isabella, elegant, calculating, his second wife, whispered something into the ear of her stepson with a smile too polished to be real. The youngest daughter, Claire, seemed the only one genuinely shaken, tears brimming as she stared at the staircase leading to her father's room. "Father's condition is deteriorating," Isabella announced in the room, her voice a blend of sorrow and subtle satisfaction. "We must discuss how to manage this state in case." "In case?" Claire interrupted sharply. "He's not dead yet." Damien chuckled, swirling his whiskey glass. "Oh, come on, Claire. We have to be practical. You don't run an empire on emotions." Isabella placed a hand over her heart. "I'm only thinking of what your father would have wanted." From behind the door at the top of the stairs, Alexander watched through a barely open slit. Every word, every gesture, every false tear. He had cameras recording, mics hidden in flower vases, the perfect stage for betrayal. That night, as the house slept, Alexander quietly moved through the halls, unseen. He entered Damien's office and turned on his hidden device. Within minutes, a recording played, Damien's voice low and conspiratorial. "Once he's gone, the transfer happens automatically. Mother gets controlling shares, I get the board seat, and you, my dear stepmother, get your share of the silence." Isabella's laugh followed, a sound like silk being torn. "And the will? The doctor believes the old man has months, maybe weeks. When it's time, we'll make sure the new draft never surfaces." Alexander froze. The air thickened with a mixture of fury and heartbreak. His own blood, plotting his death for money. But what shattered him wasn't their greed. It was another voice that joined the recording, trembling yet unmistakable. Claire's. "I don't want any part of this. He's my father." Damien snapped. "Then stay quiet if you value what's left of this family." Alexander stepped back, chest tight with shock. Claire, his only loyal child, had been living among vipers, threatened and silenced. The pain was almost unbearable. He returned to his room, but sleep never came. Instead, he crafted a plan, cold, deliberate, and perfect. By morning, the world would believe he had taken a turn for the worse. His family would soon reveal their true faces, and when they did, the House of Windsor would never be the same again. The next day, news spread to the mansion like wildfire. Alexander Windsor had fallen into a coma. The doctor's report was clear, the monitors beeping a steady rhythm of life barely hanging on. Damien and Isabella exchanged a single glance that said everything. The vultures were circling. Claire sat by her father's bedside, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "Please wake up," she whispered. "They don't deserve you, but I still need you." Her words reached him faintly through the fog of his pretense, and a tear escaped from the corner of his closed eye. By evening, Damien began making phone calls. Lawyers, board members, accountants, setting the stage for the transition of power. Isabella busied herself with rewriting documents she had no right to touch. But none of them knew that every word, every act of treachery, was being recorded live and far away, in a hidden office beneath the estate. Alexander watched the feeds on multiple screens, his expression stone. He had seen greed. He had expected lies. But what he would uncover next, buried in the shadows of his empire, would make even betrayal look innocent. The truth waiting for him would turn everything he thought he knew about his family upside down. It began with a flicker on one of the monitors, a grainy feed from the West Wing security camera. The storage room, barely used, except for old files and outdated machinery. Yet at 2:13 a.m., the motion sensor caught someone entering. Alexander leaned closer. The figure was Damien. He moved with the cautious precision of someone who had done this before, turning off one light, then another, until the room was swallowed in dimness. Then he knelt beside a crate and began prying it open. Alexander's brow furrowed. He remembered that crate. It was supposed to hold archives from the early years of Windsor Holdings, harmless financial reports, and old contracts. But as Damien pulled out a folder wrapped in plastic and shoved it into his briefcase, Alexander's instinct screamed otherwise. He switched to another camera, the hallway outside. Isabella appeared minutes later, dressed in her silk robe, a cigarette glowing between her fingers. She didn't knock. Damien stepped out, the briefcase now hidden under his arm. "Did you get it?" she whispered. He nodded. "Every document that links the offshore accounts back to me. Once he's gone, no one will ever trace a thing. And if he doesn't die soon," she murmured, voice sharp with impatience. Damien smirked. "Then maybe we'll help fate a little." Alexander froze, his pulse pounding. So it wasn't just greed. They were planning to kill him, for real this time. The pretend illness had painted a target on his back. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly, forcing calm into his veins. He'd built empires from nothing, outsmarted hostile takeovers, political threats, and blackmail. But this betrayal, inside his own bloodline, demanded something far more ruthless. He pressed a button beneath the desk, and the hidden printer whirred to life. Copies of every recording, every transaction, every whispered conversation printed out onto crisp paper. He labeled the files manually, one by one, his mind already assembling the trap. By dawn, the estate was bathed in sunlight, golden and deceptive. The world thought Alexander Windsor was unconscious. Yet behind the locked door of the basement office, the master puppeteer was already setting his stage. Claire entered her father's room early that morning, still in her nightgown, clutching a book she used to read to him when she was little. She sat beside him, brushing a strand of gray hair from his forehead. "You're the only one who ever saw me, Father," she whispered softly. "They think I don't hear them, but I do. They're already planning your funeral." Her voice trembled. "I wish you'd wake up and make them stop." Alexander heard every word, though his body remained motionless. Her loyalty gave him strength and purpose. When the time came, Claire would be the one light left in the ruins he was about to create. Hours later, Damien strode into the study, his tone brisk and businesslike. "We can't delay the meeting," he told Isabella. "If we don't start the transfer before he passes, the board might contest it." Isabella sipped her morning coffee, unbothered. "You always were impatient. The sedatives in his four will do their job soon enough. Then we can act without questions." The cup in her hand trembled slightly, betraying the calm facade. "Just make sure no one suspects." Damien smiled. No one ever suspects the grieving son. In the hidden control room, Alexander's hands clenched into fists. Sedatives. She had already started poisoning him, slowly through the four-line. His mind flashed back to the doctor's visit, how Isabella had insisted on helping administer his medications. He picked up a secure phone and dialed a single number. A voice answered after one ring. "Yes, sir." "Phase 2, Alexander said coldly. "Understood." That evening, while the mansion buzzed with false grief, a sleek black SUV rolled silently up the back drive. 3 men stepped out, men who once guarded Alexander during his most dangerous business deals overseas. Loyal, invisible, efficient, They entered through the service entrance and disappeared down the hallway, unseen by the family gathered in the main salon pretending to mourn a man still very much alive. At exactly 7 p.m., a sudden power outage plunged the entire estate into darkness. A collective gasp echoed through the halls. Claire jumped from her seat and ran upstairs toward her father's room. Isabella's voice cut through the confusion, sharp with panic. "Damien, go check the generator." Damien cursed under his breath and stormed toward the basement. But as he opened the door, a beam of light hit his face, a flashlight held by one of Alexander's men. "Mr. Windsor has been expecting you," the man said evenly. Before Damien could respond, he was grabbed, restrained, and his briefcase confiscated. The documents inside, evidence of fraud, theft, and intent to kill, were carefully photographed. Upstairs, Isabella moved through the darkened corridor, calling out, "Alexander? Claire? Is anyone there?" But she stopped when she saw a faint glow from under the study door. She pushed it open. On the desk sat a tablet, its screen bright, and on it a live video feed of her son tied to a chair in the basement. Then came Alexander's voice, calm, authoritative, impossible. "Good evening, Isabella." Her blood ran cold. She turned, and there he was, standing in the doorway, pale, yes, but very much alive. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said softly. She took a step back, words failing her. You're alive?" He smiled faintly. Disappointed? Her silence was answer enough. He crossed the room slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I trusted you. I gave you everything. And you repaid me with poison and deceit." Isabella trembled, tears welling up, though whether from fear or guilt, even she didn't know. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Damien forced me." Alexander cut her off. "No, Damien may have been the blade, but you held the handle." She stumbled toward him, desperate. "Please, Alexander, He raised a hand. "Save it. You'll get your chance to explain to the police." From the hall, footsteps approached. Claire appeared, wide-eyed, staring at her father in disbelief. "Father, you're awake." He softened for the first time. "I never slept, my dear." "Not really." She rushed into his arms, sobbing, while Isabella sank into a chair, shaking. Downstairs, Damien shouted, struggling against his restraints. "You think this changes anything? The board's already on my side. You're finished, old man." Alexander glanced at the live feed and pressed a button on the tablet. Damien's voice filled the room, his earlier confession from the night before perfectly clear. "Once he's gone, the transfer happens automatically. Mother gets controlling shares. I get the board seat." Claire covered her mouth, horrified. Isabella crumbled completely, whispering, "Oh, God!" Alexander's gaze hardened. "By tomorrow morning, the world will know everything. Every crime, every betrayal." But even as he spoke, another feed blinked to life on the monitor. A figure appeared, someone Alexander hadn't seen in years. A tall man in a dark coat, standing in the shadows of the estate's courtyard, speaking quietly into a phone. The camera zoomed in, and Alexander's face drained of color. It was Richard, his late brother's son, presumed dead in an accident 15 years ago. Only he wasn't dead, and he was here. "Tell them to proceed," Richard said into the phone. "If Alexander knows, it's time to finish this once and for all." The line crackled, but the voice on the other end was unmistakable. It was Damien's. For the first time that night, Alexander's control faltered. His heart thudded in disbelief. His son and his long-lost nephew, working together. The betrayal ran deeper than he ever imagined, and somewhere beyond the walls of his mansion, another storm was already gathering, one that no amount of wealth or power could contain. The night deepened over Windsor Estate, heavy with the kind of silence that comes before catastrophe. Wind rattled the ancient windows, carrying the first warning drops of rain. The storm was coming, and Alexander Windsor knew it wasn't the one outside that should frighten him. It was the one gathering within his own bloodline. He stood in the dim light of his study, staring at the frozen image on the tablet. His nephew, Richard, very much alive, his expression cold and purposeful. The last time Alexander saw him, he was a 20-year-old prodigy, obsessed with power, with legacy. When Richard's car plunged into the river 15 years ago, Alexander had grieved like a father. Now, realization dawned. The accident had been staged. Richard had vanished only to return as a ghost wearing the mask of vengeance. Claire's voice broke through his thoughts. "Father, what does this mean? Who is that man?" Alexander turned slowly, his eyes shadowed with the weight of revelation. "It means, my dear, that our enemies were never strangers. They were born under this very roof." Thunder rumbled, shaking the chandeliers. Isabella sat frozen on the couch, pale as marble, her mascara smudged, her mind unraveling. He can't be alive," she whispered. "Richard is dead. He drowned." Alexander's voice was a low growl. "No, he's been alive all along, feeding Damien with promises of power. And together, they built something far darker than I imagined." The door burst open before he could say more. Two men in black stormed and armed, faces masked. Isabella screamed. Claire clung to her father. "Stay behind me," Alexander ordered, his voice calm, commanding, the voice that once built an empire from steel and willpower. But the men didn't come for him. One of them stepped aside, and there, in the doorway, stood Richard. Older now, sharper, his eyes glittering like ice. He removed his gloves slowly, a cruel smile curving his lips. "Uncle," he said softly, "you always did love drama." Alexander's jaw tightened. "You should have stayed buried." "Buried?" Richard chuckled, stepping forward. "Oh, I was buried under your lies, your arrogance, your empire. You stole everything from my father and from me." "I gave you everything," Alexander snapped. "Education, name, wealth. You gave me pity." Richard's shout cracked through the air. "And when my father tried to take back what was his, you destroyed him." Claire stared in shock. "What are you talking about?" "Uncle Stephen died in an accident." Richard's eyes flashed toward her. "That's what he wanted you to believe. My father found proof that Windsor Holdings was built on deception, on stolen shares, forged contracts. Your precious father made sure he never lived to expose it." Alexander felt the weight of the accusation land like a hammer blow. The old wound reopened, bleeding memories he'd tried to forget. It was true. His brother had threatened to ruin the company decades ago, but Alexander hadn't killed him. He'd only buried the scandal deep enough to protect everyone. Or so he told himself. "You've lived in shadows for 15 years, Alexander said evenly. "All this, manipulation, betrayal, just to destroy me?" "Not destroy," Richard said. "Replace." He snapped his fingers. One of the men handed him a folder. Richard tossed it onto the desk. Paper scattering like shards of truth. "Your son helped me. Damien wanted control, and I wanted justice. Together, we forged the perfect plan. You die quietly. Damien inherits. I take over through him. The empire rebuilt under my name." Claire stepped forward, her voice shaking but firm. "You're both monsters. You think you can build anything on blood and lies?" Richard smiled faintly. "That's exactly how your father built it." Alexander's eyes met his daughter's. For the first time in years, she saw something break in him. Not fear, not anger, but regret. "Claire," he said softly, "there are things I did, choices I made to protect what I built. But I never killed my brother. I never wanted this." "Lies," Richard hissed. "You'll say anything now." Before Alexander could respond, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance, faint but growing. Richard stiffened. Alexander's lips curved into a grim smile. "You really thought I'd sit idle? The moment you stepped onto my property, I alerted the authorities. Everything you and Damien said, everything you've done, recorded, documented, and sent to my lawyer." Richard's expression darkened. "You always did have a backup plan." He turned sharply to his men. "End it." Time slowed. One of the gunmen raised his weapon. Claire screamed. Alexander moved without thinking, pushing her aside. A deafening crack split the air, then another. For a heartbeat, everything froze. The gunman fell first, a dart lodged in his neck. Not a bullet. Behind him stood one of Alexander's loyal guards, emerging from the hallway with a tranquilizer gun. "Non-lethal," the guard said. "As you ordered." The second intruder lunged for Richard, panicked. But before he could react, police lights flared through the windows. Dozens of officers swarmed the courtyard, shouting commands. Richard's plan had collapsed. The empire of deceit he built on resentment was crumbling before his eyes. Alexander walked toward him slowly, every step deliberate. "You wanted justice," he said quietly, "but what you sought was revenge. And revenge doesn't rebuild, it consumes." Richard's jaw trembled, fury warring with despair. "You don't get to lecture me. You ruined my life." "No," Alexander replied. "You ruined your own when you became what you hated." The officers entered, weapons drawn. In the chaos, Damien was dragged upstairs by security, shouting curses at everyone. Isabella sobbed, trembling uncontrollably. Claire stood frozen, her heart pounding, watching the empire she was born in to turn to ash around her. Richard was handcuffed, his defiance fading into silence. Before the officers took him away, he looked back at Alexander, eyes burning with one last, bitter truth. "You may have won tonight, but history will still call you the villain." Alexander didn't answer. He simply turned his gaze toward the window, where dawn was breaking, pale, uncertain, but alive. Hours later, as the estate quieted under the weight of aftermath, Claire sat beside her father once more. The storm had passed, leaving the air heavy with the scent of rain and renewal. "Everything's gone," she whispered. "The company, the family, everything." Alexander looked out at the drenched gardens, his expression unreadable. "Not everything," he murmured. "What's gone were illusions. What remains is truth, and truth is where rebuilding begins." She turned to him, tears in her eyes. "But what if the truth destroys you?" He smiled faintly. "Then at least I'll know it was real." Silence settled between them, soft and heavy. Isabella had been taken away under police escort, her fate uncertain. Damien faced charges of conspiracy and attempted murder. Richard's name filled the headlines, the lost heir who tried to kill his uncle. The Windsor name, once untouchable, now carried the weight of scandal. And yet, amidst the ruins, Alexander felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. The empire could be rebuilt. Money could be regained. But family, trust, those would take a lifetime. One evening, weeks later, Alexander stood on the balcony overlooking the city skyline, the wind tugging at his coat. Claire joined him quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "They say the board wants you back," she said softly. "They want you to lead again." He chuckled. "Lead? I think I've done enough leading to last 10 lifetimes." She smiled faintly. "Then what now?" Alexander looked out at the horizon, where the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and crimson. "Now," he said slowly, "we build something different. Something that can't be bought or stolen." She tilted her head. "What's that?" "Legacy," he replied. "Not in buildings or bank accounts, but in people." Claire's eyes softened. "You mean me?" He smiled. "You've always been the best part of me." The wind carried their laughter into the fading light. The mansion behind them stood silent, not as a monument of power anymore, but as a reminder of survival. And somewhere deep within its walls, Alexander's hidden control room still hummed softly, screens flickering with the remnants of what once was. Recordings, memories, the ghosts of family devoured by ambition. But on one of the screens, a single new file appeared, titled Asterisk the Rebirth. Asterisk. Alexander watched it for a long moment before turning it off. For the first time in years, he no longer needed proof, nor vengeance, nor power. The truth had set him free, and though the world would remember Alexander Windsor as a billionaire who uncovered shocking secrets within his own family, the real story would live on quietly, in the eyes of the only person who never betrayed him. Claire looked at her father as the final rays of daylight kissed the horizon. "You know," she said softly, "for someone who pretended to be sick, you healed more than any of us ever did." Alexander smiled, the lines of sorrow easing from his face. "Sometimes," he said, "you have to die in people's eyes to truly see who they are." The sun slipped below the skyline, the night calmed, and for the first time in a long time, the House of Windsor finally rested in peace.